We want to take a look back this morning and how the vice presidential debate has been a game changer or not. The first televised vice presidential debate took place in 1976 as Senators Walter Mondale and Bob Dole squared off in Houston. Let's bring in presidential historian Doug Wead to talk more about this. Doug, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Maria.
So we want to go through some of these because I think some of them really resonate. Let's start with then Vice President George H.W. Bush and Congressman Geraldine Ferrara in 1984. Here's a snippet. Got to get your reaction.
Let me help you with the difference, Ms. Ferraro, between Iran and the embassy in Lebanon.
Let me just say, first of all, that I almost resent, Vice President Bush, your patronizing attitude that you have to teach me about foreign policy.
Doug, many thought Vice President Bush was patronizing, but why didn't this tip the scale for the Democrats in the election?
Yes, it's because we're looking at it through a 21st century lens, and I can tell you, you can see how far women have come, because at the time it was viewed that Vice President George H.W. Bush had treated her very gingerly, and he had walked this delicate tightrope between being condescending and being assertive on the issues, and he got high marks for it. He certainly doesn't now in hindsight with history.
Wow, really interesting how the time has changed. Today, that wouldn't be the case. In 1988, Doug, Senator Lloyd Bentsen questioned Senator Dan Quayle's qualification to serve as vice president. Watch this.
Senator, I served with Jack Kennedy. I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
That was really uncalled for, Senator.
You're the one that was making the comparisons, Senator.
That was probably one of the most infamous exchanges, right, Doug? What lessons can Mike Pence and Tim Kaine take away from that?
Well, that's very complicated and hard to explain. There are two schools of thinking. One, a lot of political operatives say never use a line from your stump speech in the debate because it's going to be smashed. And Quayle had used that line to justify his age and compare himself to Kennedy. But other political operatives say, oh, no, the problem here was that Quayle froze like a deer caught in the headlights, that the lines from your stump speech are your best lines. They're pulled out of you by the audience. They got you the nomination. They're popular. It's almost subconscious how they've come. You've got to use the lines from your stump speech, but unlike Quayle, you've got to be prepared to counterpunch and defend yourself because it will be attacked. And they would have suggested Quayle coming back saying, yes, I'm young, so what? The Reagan-Bush revolution has turned the economy around. We don't want to go back to the old days of double-digit inflation with Jimmy Carter. If the Democrats don't want the young people, the Republicans will take them. But instead, he froze. And so there's a double lesson there and a debate over what's the best way to respond.
Okay, so fast forward to 1992. There was a three-way debate between incumbent Vice President Dan Quayle, Al Gore, and independent candidate Vice Admiral James Stockdale. Watch this.
Who am I? Why am I here? I know how governments, how American governments can be courageous and how they can be callow, and that's important.
So he had to put the glasses on to read something. I mean, Doug, should candidates be trying out a new phrase for the first time on such a huge stage?
No, you're absolutely right, Maria.
Weird.
And this confirms what I just previously said about Quayle. If he had used that line and those paragraphs on the stump, starting in the kitchen, then to the auditorium, the audience would have helped correct him and helped practice him and helped him see that those lines were going to be misinterpreted. You don't do something new in the debate, and that's a lesson taken away from that very awkward moment.
You don't want to do anything new. You don't want to take anything from the stump speech. Okay, so I want to get the panel involved after this one because this is really a good one. Vice President Joe Biden and Governor Sarah Palin meet in a highly anticipated face-off in 2008. Let's listen.
Nice to meet you. Hey, can I call you Joe?
You can
okay, good. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you, Gwen. Thank you. Thank you.
Can I call you Joe? So, Doug, what made something as simple as greeting your opponent so memorable there?
Well, she disarmed everyone. The media expectation was that she was going to be slaughtered. And when she didn't live up to those expectations, when she acquitted herself quite well, they were savage. I mean, when you compare the 1984 debate with Bush and Ferraro to the savagery against Sarah Palin, you can see we've come a long way, baby. Women now can fly jet fighters. They can fight in the Army. And if they're liberals, they can run for president.
Yeah.
But Sarah Palin acquitted herself very well. She was highly attacked. Even her child, there were media reports that she wasn't the mother of her own child. It was vicious. So we've come a long way, baby.
Yeah, the vitriol was incredible. By the way, we have one of those fighter pilots here on set today, Leah Gabrielle. We're so happy you're here.
Thank you. And they even let me fly the planes that were made for men, not the ones that were made for women.
Yeah.
It's great. That's a joke, by the way.
What did you guys think? The vice presidential debate tonight, John Hilsenrath, how important is it?
Well, I want to hear what Doug has to say about the tone of this thing. My suspicion is that the two candidates are going to use this podium to try to score points against the nominees, that it's going to be Pence against Hillary and Kaine against Trump. Is that the way you see it, or do you think they're actually going to talk about policy?
I think a little of both, but you make a very, very good point. The debate between Biden and Palin was the most watched debate in history. Some say this one isn't going to match that. In fact, the driver that picked me up this morning said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "The vice presidential debates." He said, "Oh, when are those?"
Yeah.
So we'll see. I'll be watching. The one thing about these vice presidential debates is they make a lot of noise, and usually there are gaffes. Some people say they'll do no harm tonight, and they'll try to get through it without a gaffe.
I just want to point out one thing on the TV ratings, that the Sarah Palin-Joe Biden debate was the only VP debate to eclipse the average Nielsen rating of the presidential debates in that year, according to the Wall Street Journal.
Wow.
So it actually topped the average.
Dynamic character, so everyone wanted to see how Sarah Palin did.
Well, I think that John McCain and Barack Obama were plenty dynamic. And so the fact that they eclipsed the average of those debates, that was pretty. That was.
Doug, quick question, though. Do you see that these debates, these vice presidential debates, really move the needle, though? You know, the 1988 Quayle, Benson, you know, that quip, I think the Democrats still lost 40 of 50 states in that election.
Yeah, not only do the debates not move the needle, the selection of the vice president doesn't move the needle in my lifetime. Only John Kennedy's selection of LBJ in 1960 probably made a difference in the national election. It definitely did. But other than that, now in a close election with hanging chads, anything, everything can matter.
Yeah, it sure can. All right, Doug, thank you so much. Great analysis from you. We appreciate it.
Thank you,
Doug
Maria.
Wead,